When the smell of blood becomes a habit, you stop noticing where the prey ends and where you begin. My name is Troy, and the packs call me the one who leaves bones. They say it with a mix of fear and superstition, the way wolves speak of fire in low voices, with eyes turned toward the tree line, as if the bark itself might be listening. I can't stop them from speaking, just as I can't stop the crows from gossiping over carrion. The forest makes prophets of everyone who's learned to be quiet. I am lean. Some have said stringy, as if the wilderness pulled me thin the way a bow pulls a string. My hands are scarred where steel met teeth, and there's a pale bite, scar running along the inside of my forearm like a crooked river. I move the way I learned to survive. No extra sound, no wasted breath, no sudden gestures unless I mean them. The abandoned hunting grounds are a map of bones and bad decisions. The ridgelines saw at the sky, and the mist clings to them as if the earth is still learning to exhale. Pine, wet loam, a whisper of iron. Every scent stacks on the tongue until it makes a language of its own. It is a grammar I know too well. Broken twigs, bent grasses, a smear of mud on rock where someone slipped and swore under their breath. Beta breath, shallow and hurried, the kind that knows it shouldn't be here. I find the track where the trespasser thundered through the ferns and didn't bother to backtrack. Fancy that. Thinking a straight line is the same as safety. Idiot, I tell the forest, because the forest and I have that sort of relationship. It keeps secrets for me. I give it honest commentary in return. I stalk. There's a rhythm to hunting that isn't about speed or teeth. It's about patience, as old as the cracked knuckle of the moon. At the base of the ravine, the beta has stopped to catch his breath, his scent caught in the cup of the land. He reeks of cheap courage and a pack crest I don't recognize, like river clay and old smoke. His heartbeat is frantic, thudding through the air like a drum he can't stop dancing to. He fumbles with a knife. The blade shines in the mist like an idea he doesn't believe in. Go home, I say softly, because I am not cruel by nature, though I've been called worse things. He jerks, spins, knife up, eyes glassy with adrenaline. Who's there? Wrong question, I say. Try again. He swallows. He doesn't try again. What I do next is fast, not showy, not creative. Effectiveness is its own art. I knock the knife aside, put my shoulder into his chest, and when he's face down in the ferns, I pin him with a knee and a forearm, gentle as a teacher guiding a child's hand away from fire. He thrashes. I let him. Resistance is a kind of grief. It passes. I wasn't. He starts, voice muffled by wet leaves. You were, I say, and you knew it. He tries to shift. My weight says no. The forest says hush. In the end, I take his breath the way the fog takes the horizon, simply, without malice. There's a last tremor, and then there is only the rain's patient tapping on fern fronds, the sigh of the pines. I'm not proud of it, and I'm not ashamed. Survival isn't a kindness, it's a calculation. I roll him over, close his eyes, and make my small altar. From the leather pouch at my hip, I take a sliver of bone, cleaned, sanded, light as a promise. With a heated iron, I burn the mark, a spiral cut with a notch, the old symbol my scattered dead once used to warn their young. It is not a threat. It is a boundary drawn in the language of what remains when words fail. I lay the bone against his sternum and press 2 fingers there in something. That may be prayer, and may be the last practical thing I can do. Don't come back, I tell him, which is both a warning to others and a wish that the world learned something. The wind changes, not a big shift, just a clean draft from the higher slopes, shouldering through the hollows like a messenger with a secret. Pine, frost, bright metal, alpha. Not any alpha I know. Not pack-thick, not musk-heavy with the stink of many bodies and shared dens. This scent is clear and cold, a cliff edge, a blade quenched in snowmelt. Not a pack, not a drifter, not an idiot. Something else. I rise, every part of me pausing between breaths, and the forest hilts. A new gravity pulls on my teeth, my ribs, my stubborn thoughts. My own nature leans forward and pricks its ears like a hound who doesn't know whether to bark or sit. I hate that feeling, the burn in the chest that says, pay attention. The last time I listened to it, I woke up with fewer people to argue with, and more ghosts to keep me company. I shoulder my pack and move, cutting across the ravine along a contour, line the hunters never find because they're too fond of valleys. Up where rock teeth bite the sky, the wind peels the smell away from the clutter and gives it to me straight. Cold, old, patient. I track it to the ridge. There, above the white scratch of a creek, and the skeletons of lightning-struck pines, is a fire. It burns like it has permission. The man sitting beside it doesn't look like he needs anybody's permission. He's tall even at rest, shoulders built to carry weather without complaint, the kind of stillness that isn't caution, but confidence, the kind forged, not by winning easy fights, but by not backing down from hard ones. Hair dark as rain in the night, trimmed close on the sides, longer at the crown where the wind keeps trying to get its fingers in. He turns when I step from the trees, and his eyes catch the light. Gold, with the faintest flecks of darker metal, like someone stirred iron filings into amber, and then decided to call it sight. I stay where the shadows do me favors. Old habits are a religion in these lands. Mine have kept me breathing. He doesn't look around to find me. He doesn't need to. The angle of his head says he already knows I'm there. The half-smile says he knows I know. So, he says, voice as even as a blade's edge, "You're Troy. Names in these hills are keys. I don't hand mine out to strangers." He says mine like we're at a table, and someone brought bread. "And you are?" I ask. "Thirsty," he says, and lifts a canteen as if toasting the mist. The joke is simple, almost childlike, and it hits me sideways. Alphas usually open with growling and end with demands. This one opens with water and ends unannounced. "You got lost then," I say. "These are bad directions for polite company." He studies me through the fire's shifting spokes. "Company's a generous word," he answers. "I came for your mark. A lesser wolf would bristle. I do not bristle. I catalog information like I catalog scents. There are many reasons to come for my mark: fear, challenge, superstition, some fool belief that breaking it will break me." His tone doesn't fit any of those pockets. "You want the bone," I say. "The sign," he nods once. "It calls." "Does it?" I say, flat, because some part of my chest did a small, irritated lurch at the word calls. He pushes to his feet in a single motion that's almost elegant. He is not young, not glossy with arrogance. He wears his years like a good knife wears its patina. He tugs on a leather glove slowly, not because he needs to, but because some choices deserve no hurry. "Who sent you?" I ask. "No one." He looks past me, over my shoulder, at the slope that was once a den. Then a graveyard, then simply a place the wind grieves through. If he knows what he's looking at, he doesn't say. "I came to see if the stories were true." "They never are," I say. "Stories were invented because facts are inconvenient." He huffs a breath that might be a laugh. "You're funny," he says. "Good. I prefer the ones who can talk back." It is a strange compliment to feel dangerous. It lands on my skin like snow, cold, dissolving, gone, leaving the place warmer where it touched. He does not move closer. He does not posture. He lets the fire do the talking and the wind do the introductions. "You hunted a beta," he says. "And found an alpha," I say. "Poor day for both of us." His lips twitch. "Or the start of a better one." He slides 2 fingers into a pocket and draws out, what else? A small sliver of bone. It's not mine. It bears no mark. But the way he holds it tells me he understands the Sermon of Remains. "I don't belong to a pack," he says simply. "I came down from the northern ranges. I'm looking for someone worth the climb." There's a flare of old anger in me, bright and efficient. Worth. The word sticks like gristle. Alphas have always been measuring sticks disguised as men. "And you think that's me," I say. "I think," he answers, those gold eyes unblinking, "you're the first thing in a very long time that felt like a door instead of a wall." There is a crack in the sky, far off, thunder teaching the hills what echo means. The fire licks its own mouth. "You have a name?" I ask, because if the conversation insists on being civilized, I may as well help it along. He straightens. The wind shifts again and puts his scent cleanly in my lungs. Mountain air, pine resin, iron. The kind of scent that promises winter and keeps it. Kale, he says. From the northern mountains. I let the syllable settle in my head. It fits him like his shoulders fit his coat. He turns on the ridge, and in that movement something like ritual unspools, a backlit outline, of a man who has never learned to bow unless it was to lift something heavier than before. He cups his hands and lets his voice fall into the valley, not shouting so much as speaking in a tone cliffs understand. Troy of the Grey Lands, Kale calls, and the mist carries the words like a procession. I'm coming for your mark. I smile before I mean to. It's a small private thing, mostly teeth and regret. The forest leans in. I've missed the lunatics, I say, and the trees, being trees, pretend not to hear me. Kale didn't come for blood. He said as much the next morning, when the fog lay in sheets along the gullies and the wind kept changing its mind. I'm not here for your throat, he called from a ridge over, voice traveling like it knew the shortcut. I'm here for your mark. It calls. The hills are a choir when they want to be. Today they hummed under everything. Grass-laced wind, the tick of grasshoppers, the dry rattle of last year's seed pods. Even the crows felt like spectators. If the land could fold its arms, it would have. He didn't push. He never pushed. He stood easy with the slope under his boots, hands empty, the sun washing his, shoulders pale gold like it had been practicing all winter for this moment. Calm, contained, he had the air of someone who could pick a boulder up if he needed to, and the patience not to prove it. You have a talent for ominous, I said to the junipers watching me from the ravine. And for being in the way, I slipped from shade to shade along a dry stream bed. The earth cracked like old knuckles where water used to live. The scent of him, pine, cold iron, high air, moved steadily ahead as if guided by a string. If he were like other alphas I've met, there would be musk and the sour burn of ego in the nose. Kale smelled like weather, which was frankly inconvenient. I checked the first snare. Nothing. The second, a whisper net drawn between leaning willows, barely stirred as a jay tested it with a feather and decided it lacked the proper gravitas. The third was the one with teeth, a rockfall perched on a hair trigger, vine, set to greet a bootstep with a sudden lesson in gravity. Maybe he'll trip, I muttered, adjusting the tension. Maybe I'll get to go home early and argue with nothing like I prefer. I moved higher, trading the hush of the stream bed for the low, constant wind that combed the grass on the shoulders of the hills. From here the forest looked like something asleep, its dark lungs filling and emptying with shadow. Somewhere beyond, Kale descended into the shallow scoop of land where I'd set the fourth trap, simple, mean, and effective. A wire noose at ankle height, masked by crushed sage. No grand gestures. Just physics. The scent turned sharper. He was close. My skin lifted the way it does when lightning looks at you. I saw him a moment before it happened, a tall shape cresting a hummock, gold eyes narrowed against the light, an almost smile drifting at the corner of his mouth like a thought he hadn't yet decided to share. He moved like he belonged to the incline, like gravity, and he had an agreement. Then the noose hissed, the wire sang, and his right leg jerked sideways into the waiting bite of its loop. He went down on one knee, not with surprise, but with a controlled exhale, like a man accepting a seat he hadn't asked for. The wire bit deep above the boot, and the stone I'd hidden in the scrub slid, then leapt, dropping its full rude weight across the taut line. The metal kissed flesh. He swore in a language that sounded like wind over rock. And then, because the day insisted on being strange, he laughed. Not loud, not showy, a low, warm sound that ran under the skin like stream water. He put a gloved hand to his thigh, came away red, blinked at the stain with a look that wasn't shock, just acknowledgement, the way a man nods at rain. You could back away, I said from the grass, my voice strolling to meet him before I did. There's a whole horizon to choose from. He looked directly at the thicket where I'd folded myself into shadow, and somehow his eyes found mine through branch and light. But this is your path, and you always inconvenience hosts in their own homes? I try to be memorable, he said lightly. Then, softer, as if confiding something to the earth, you hurt me. That means you noticed. That's already a step toward acknowledgement. It should have irritated me. It did. It also landed somewhere behind my ribs and tugged, just once, like a child who wants to be sure you're listening. Don't make poetry out of bleeding, I said. He smudged the blood with his thumb, considered it, and wiped it on the grass with neat economy. Fair. I make it out of walking, then. He examined the rig, the line, the stone, the angle of pull. His mouth ticked again, not quite a smile. He didn't yank. He didn't fight. He reached down, found the knot I'd tucked beneath a tuft of wiry grass, and, this annoyed me more than the laughing, undid it correctly. The pressure eased. The wire loosened. He pulled his leg free, slow so it wouldn't tear, and stood with the careful grace of a man learning a room's ceiling with his head. Blood ran dark into his boot. He stamped once, testing. The stamp carried strength. He'd walk. Your knots are good, he said. Your angle's better. Your manners are strange. So I've been told. He limped to a patch of rock as if he were choosing a pew in a familiar chapel and sat. He didn't look at me for permission, which somehow managed to be less rude than asking. A hawk circled. The grass whispered something complicity-shaped. You're not afraid, I said, which surprised me on the way out of my mouth. I didn't mean it as a question. Kale flexed his ankle, hissed only a fraction, and leaned back on his. Hands like the sky was an old story he'd heard before but still liked. Fear is useful, he said, but it's not a compass. Not for what I want. And what do you want? He turned his head just enough to let the gold of his gaze skim me. The color wasn't a trick of light, it was a fact. Your mark, you keep saying that, I said, as if repetition makes it less absurd. It makes it true, he replied mildly. Sometimes truth needs to be repeated to be believed. The wind went through sage, carrying its clean bitterness. I should have been already gone, a shadow among shadows, bending the land back over me like a blanket. Instead, I watched him braid a strip of cloth around his lower thigh, tight enough to slow the leak, not tight enough to starve the limb, and realized I was cataloging his competence the way I cataloged the edges of the ravines. You're bleeding on my route, I said, because banter is a bridge I use when I am dangerously close to thinking. Then I'll bless it, he said, and tipped his head toward the earth with mock solemnity. May this path never be dull. The irritation was a little sparkler in my chest. What was worse than fear was curiosity. Why didn't his presence roll me like thunder? Why did it lift my hackles and my attention in the same breath? The part of me that belonged to the animal turned its head toward him and kept it there. Leave, I said, and felt the word taste wrong. Find another rumor to follow. I could, he said. He stood again, testing weight, testing patience, testing me. Or I could stay until the rumor becomes a conversation. I don't converse. Liar, he said, but it came out almost fond, like he was complimenting a child for stealing a pie well. I exhaled through my teeth and moved, not toward him, past him. My humor, when it exists, has a bone in it. I curtained myself in willows, veered uphill, and set the next trap with fingers that knew the song by heart. Snare line, trip, branch, deadfall loaded but generous, the kind that bruises pride harder than flesh. I wanted to see how he'd rate it. I wanted to see him read me. Across the slope, his scent paced me, steady and bright as a coin under water. He limped, yes, but he did not slow. He let the pain thread through his stride like a lesson and carried on. They're all watching, I told the grasses, which were too busy being gorgeous in the wind to answer. You, the birds, the ground. You want a show? Here, I angled the last two traps into the pinch of a deer run, then doubled back along a contour line only the foxes use. When I surfaced at the crest, the world opened into a long, slow bowl of land. My path ran like a darker seam through it. Kale, bleeding, calm, walked onto that seam as if he'd read it off my palms. He stopped where my footprints softened the dust. He looked down, then up, and then he did something I did not expect. He shrugged off his pack, gathered stones, broke a dead limb under his heel, and built a fire right there on my trail. neat as a signature, shameless as a bell. The pile kindled quick under his coaxing. He fed it with a care that made it companionable, not defiant. Smoke went up in a narrow ribbon that the wind couldn't decide whether to steal. An invitation, plain as a hand. He glanced toward the ridge where I stood. "Your move," he said, voice mild, as if we were sitting at a table with cards and daylight to waste. My heart, traitor, smiled. My mind sharpened. The world leaned closer, holding its breath. The rain came like it had a score to settle. By midnight, the hills were veins of mud and water, the air slick with thunder's breath. Every tree leaned under the weight of it. Every root drank the sky. The smell was a riot. Wet leaves, lightning, and the iron tang of the world's open wound. I had decided the game was over. Kale had laughed through the last trap, bled, and still managed to make a campfire like an invitation. A sane man would have left him there. I wasn't sure I still qualified, so I hunted. The rain masked my scent, washed away the soft give of my footsteps. Perfect. If the forest wanted to play accomplice, I'd take the help. I followed the glow of the fire until it smudged to amber between trunks. The closer I came, the more I heard it. His breathing, slow, deliberate. Not the uneasy rhythm of prey, the measured calm of someone waiting. I almost laughed. He was expecting me. Fine. Let him have what he wanted. I moved. Fast. Branches whipped past, water sprayed in ribbons off my arms. I hit him from the side, shoulder first, and we rolled in the mud, a blur of growls and impact. He caught my wrist. I twisted out. I slashed low. He blocked, not to hurt, but to redirect. Every motion of his was control wrapped in stillness. It wasn't a fight. It was a storm with choreography. He moved like gravity was optional. I moved like I'd never trusted it anyway. Our claws raked mud instead of flesh. Our feet found purchase and lost it in the same breath. The rain turned the world to glass and noise. At one point, his hand locked around the back of my neck. I spun, teeth bared, and our faces collided close enough that I felt his breath in mine. Hot, metallic, alive. For half a heartbeat, the world stilled. His eyes caught the lightning. Gold, with veins of darker metal, like molten ore cooling mid-glow. Beautiful, unsettling, unfair. He wasn't snarling. He was smiling. "Still think I'm a lunatic?" he asked, voice low, half laughing. "Lunatics bleed less," I shot back, driving my knee into his thigh. He grunted, but didn't let go. Instead of striking back, he leaned in, so close I could smell the pine and steel on his skin, and said quietly, "You don't hate me as much as you want to." I shoved him, hard. "You don't know a damn thing about me." He didn't answer. He caught me again. Every time I tried to strike, he absorbed it, redirected it, softened it. The rain made our movements slip between brutality and grace. There were moments, terrifying, absurd moments, when it felt like we were dancing, not fighting. My claws grazed his chest, his hand closed around my shoulder. We locked, twisted, slid in the mud, breathing the same storm. Then, a mistake. I slipped. He didn't. His weight drove me into the earth, pinning me there. Cold water rushed over my cheek, the ground's pulse in my ears. He leaned down, his voice quieter than the rain. "You're not my enemy, Troy." I froze. "You're just a beast who forgot why he lives." The words hit harder than claws. They landed in a place I didn't want touched. For a moment, my throat forgot what air was for. How dare he say it like he'd seen it, like he knew. My pulse snarled. I lashed out, not to kill, not even to win, but to reclaim space, breath, control. I rolled us over, drove my forearm across his chest. The mud between us steamed with heat. "Don't you pretend to see me," I said. "You don't know what it means to be hunted for what you were born as." His expression didn't flinch, just a faint tightening around his mouth. "Then show me." The rain came harder, blurring his face, but not the gold of his eyes. They burned through the downpour like twin suns losing patience. And suddenly, I was tired, so tired of being teeth and threat and silence. I pushed away from him, chest heaving. "You talk too much." He chuckled, softly, breath catching from exertion. You fight too beautifully to waste it on hate. I turned to leave before I said something stupid. My hand brushed my side, came away red. A clean slice, shallow but speaking. Across the clearing, his blood mirrored mine, trickling down his arm. Mixed with rain until it was impossible to tell which was which. We stood there, two idiots bleeding in a storm, breathing the same broken air. He reached for me, not to grab, but as if to steady the distance. Troy. Don't, I snapped, sharper than I meant. My voice cracked on it, betraying something raw. He held up his palm, showing the smear of his own blood. Then take it as it is. Proof I don't hunt what I don't respect. And with that, he turned away. No posturing, no threat. Just turned and walked into the dark, the rain erasing his outline one heartbeat at a time. The scent of him lingered, though. Metal and pine and something deeper. Trust, maybe. When the wind shifted, I realized he'd left part of himself behind, a trail of red along the mud, fading into the forest. He wasn't marking territory. He was leaving a promise. The forest was quiet again, but it wasn't the same quiet. I knelt where he'd stood, rainwater pooling in the prints he left. For a long moment, I just stared at them, trying not to understand. Because if I did, I'd have to admit that for the first time in years, the hunt didn't feel like running away. It felt like being found. Dawn came like an afterthought, thin, colorless, slow to admit it had survived the storm. The forest steamed where the rain had broken it open, the scent of wet pine thick enough to drink. I moved through it, half exhausted, half hungry, entirely sure that Kale had finally given up. I was wrong. The ground under my boots gave a faint metallic whisper, too soft to be twig or stone. My instinct screamed a second too late. The air snapped. Steel bit the light. A net of wire flung upward from the ferns, slick with rain, wrapping me in a hiss of tension and cold. It cinched tight, the cords digging into my shoulders, ribs, arms. I hit the dirt hard, the sound knocked out of me, and for a moment, all I could hear was the creak of metal settling into its new shape around me. A trap. His trap. Of course it was. Clever bastard, I growled, testing the give. None. The wires were braided steel, thin enough to move, strong enough to hold. A hunter's patience woven into metal, and there he was, sitting by a small fire not 5 paces away, elbows on his knees, calm as sunrise. He wasn't even armed, at least not visibly, just his coat, his steady posture, his quiet. The fire cracked politely between us. Morning, Kale said. His tone was conversational, like I'd stumbled into his camp instead of his trap. Go ahead, I said through my teeth. Show your fangs. He tilted his head, gold eyes catching the firelight. You've seen my fangs. Didn't leave an impression? Maybe I blinked during your big moment. His mouth curved, not a grin, not mockery. Something slower. Then I'll have to make this one count. I jerked against the net. It groaned, but didn't yield. Every tug made the strands cut deeper, drawing thin threads of blood that glimmered dark against the wire. He didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't do what alphas are supposed to do when an omega bares teeth. No dominance, no mock superiority, just quiet attention, the kind that makes you more aware of every breath you take. He reached into the pack beside him, pulled out a flask, and rolled it across the dirt toward me. It bumped my thigh. Water, he said simply. I stared at it like it might explode. What, no poison? Too early for dramatics. Maybe you prefer watching your victims die slow. I prefer conversation, he said. Drink. You'll need your voice. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. Instead, I took a small swallow because my throat was dry, and damned if I was going to make a point by choking on pride. The water was clean, cold, infuriatingly kind. What do you want, Kale? He poked at the fire with a branch, embers sighing upward. A talk. You've got my attention. No, he said, meeting my gaze. I want your truth. Big word. Comes with a price. I already paid, he said, glancing at the fading bruise on his leg. Blood counts, doesn't it? He wasn't wrong. That almost made it worse. The silence between us stretched, taut as the net. The canyon around us held its breath, stone walls rising on either side, a slice of sky just beginning to pale. It felt like we were sitting in the ribcage of the world, a place that swallowed noise and spit out honesty. I shifted, testing the chords again. They hummed, alive under the tension. He'd made them himself, probably, too precise to be store-bought. "You planned this," I said. "I prepare," he replied. "Planning implies I knew you'd fall for it. You calling me predictable?" He smiled faintly. "Persistent. There's a difference. Persistent gets you killed, or it gets you a conversation by the fire." My glare didn't seem to bother him. He reached again into his pack and tossed something small, wrapped in cloth. It landed near my knee. The smell hit first, cooked meat. Rabbit. By the scent of it. "I'm not eating your charity. Then call it logistics." He leaned back, folding his arms. "I can't talk to a starving man. You'll get sarcastic." "I'm always sarcastic." "Exactly," he said. "So, humor me." I wanted to tell him where to shove his generosity, but the hunger gnawed deeper than pride. I tore a strip with my teeth. It was good, annoyingly so. For a long time, the only sounds were fire and chewing. Kale didn't break the silence. He seemed content to wait, like he had all the patience of the mountains he came from. And maybe he did. Finally, he said quietly, "You could break that net if you shifted." "I know. So why haven't you?" The question landed between us, heavier than the fire's crackle. I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. Because some part of me, the part that always runs, was still sitting there not running. He nodded as if I'd said something profound. "You'll figure it out." Then he stood, stretching, the movement smooth despite the lingering stiffness in his leg. He walked a slow circle around the fire, never coming too close, always leaving space. "You think I'm trying to claim you," he said. "I'm not." "You set a trap," I snapped. "That's a strange way to say hello." "You set dozens before that," he reminded me. "And you didn't kill me when you had the chance. That was strategy. That was mercy." The word scraped something raw inside me. "Don't confuse instinct with kindness." He crouched beside the net, close enough that I could see the pale scar across his throat. It wasn't new. It looked like survival had left its signature there, too. "Then maybe," he said softly, "we both act on instincts we don't understand yet." His voice was steady, but there was something underneath it, a thread of honesty that made my pulse misstep. He stood again, threw another branch on the fire and added, "You'll break free when you decide to. I'm not here to force it." He stepped back, hands open, and turned toward the shadows beyond the fire. The canyon was silent except for the whisper of burning wood and the soft breath of dawn climbing the walls. When he disappeared into the gloom to rest, I finally moved. Quietly, testing each wire, twisting. The net strained, metal protesting against muscle and will. It began to give, slow and stubborn. By midnight, I'd loosened enough to slip one arm free. The path was open. I didn't leave. I sat there, half-freed, staring at the fire he'd left burning just bright enough to keep me warm. I told myself I stayed because I wanted to understand his plan. I told myself it was strategy, not hesitation, but the truth settled heavier than the net itself. I didn't move because, for the first time, I wasn't being hunted, and that was more confusing than any cage. By the time the sun climbed over the canyon's rim, the fire had burned down to coals. The smoke curled lazily into the pale morning like it had nothing left to prove. I was still tangled halfway in the steel net, though by now I could have ripped it apart if I'd really wanted to. Kale sat opposite me, his back against the rock wall, calm as ever. He'd cooked something. Fish, maybe. The scent of it mingled with the mountain air, and the faint sweetness of sap from the burning wood. He hadn't spoken since dawn, and that silence was starting to itch under my skin. Finally, he broke it. "Do you know what happens to alphas in the north if they stay alone too long?" I didn't look at him. "They get bored and start setting traps for strangers?" He chuckled, low and brief. "Close. They go mad." I raised an eyebrow. "Define mad." "Worse than losing your mind," he said, staring into the fire. You lose your instincts. You stop feeling the pull of the pack, the call of others. You stop recognizing your own reflection. His voice softened, like he was talking to memory rather than to me. In the high ranges, where the storms never stop, alphas travel in pairs. We anchor each other, balance the beast inside. Without that, the wild eats us from the inside out. I didn't answer right away. The flames cracked softly. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk screamed against the sky, the sound sharp as a blade. "So you came south," I said finally. "To find a leash?" His mouth quirked. "To find someone who doesn't need one. Touching," I muttered. "And what makes you think you'd find that here?" He turned his head, gold eyes catching a glint of firelight. "Because your name's spoken like a warning. Because even alphas flinch when they talk about you. Because a creature who scares the predators must have something left that the rest of us lost." I snorted. "Flattering me won't make me your pet." "I'm not looking for a pet," he said quietly. "I'm looking for an equal." That stopped me for a breath. He didn't mean it like a challenge. He said it like a confession. The silence after was heavier than the canyon walls. I stared into the fire until the orange bled into red and the shapes blurred. "My pack thought the same once," I said finally. My voice came out too steady, too sharp. That they were equal. That loyalty mattered. Kale didn't interrupt. "They followed an alpha who promised protection," I went on. "When the border skirmishes started, he sold us out for a truce, left the Omegas to the slaughter." I gave a small, humorless laugh, said it was for the greater good. I guess that's one of those noble phrases that always means someone else dies. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of smoke and pine between us. Kale's gaze didn't waver. "What did you do?" he asked softly. "What do you think?" I met his eyes. I made sure he didn't get to enjoy his peace treaty. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The fire hissed quietly, and a thin line of ash collapsed into itself. "You survived," he said finally. "Survival's not the same as living." "It's the first step," he countered. I shook my head. "You talk like someone who's never had to count graves." "Maybe that's why I came down here," he said. "To learn how many it takes before you stop running from the ghosts." The honesty in his voice caught me off guard. It wasn't pity. It wasn't curiosity. It was recognition. I looked away, suddenly uncomfortable with the way the air felt between us. "You really think this is how you'll find your equal? By trapping him and talking about philosophy?" "Worked better than fighting," he said. "I'm still breathing, aren't I?" "Barely," I said, but my tone lacked bite. The fire crackled. Kale leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees, his posture loose but steady. "I came not to kill, Troy," he said. "I came to find someone who wouldn't bow, someone who knows what it means to stand alone and still not break." For a heartbeat, something unspoken passed between us. Heat, exhaustion, mutual understanding, or maybe just the quiet relief of being seen. Then I blinked, and it was gone. "Congratulations," I said dryly. "You found me. Now what?" He studied me for a moment, then reached out, not to touch, but to grip one of the steel cords binding me. With a slow, deliberate motion, he wrapped the wire around his hands and pulled. The muscles in his arms tightened, veins standing out against his skin. Metal screamed. Sparks flared where the strands snapped. In a few seconds, the net sagged around me like dead weight. He didn't look triumphant, just tired. "You're free," he said simply. I stared at him, at the shredded wire, then at my own hands. "You could have done that hours ago." "I could have," he agreed. "But then you wouldn't have stayed." There was nothing to say to that. He stood, brushed dirt from his palms and stepped back, giving me space. The mountains around us seemed to hold their breath, waiting for a choice. I pushed the rest of the net aside and stood. The cold air hit the places where the wire had cut into my skin, sharp and clean. I should have run, should have vanished into the tree line, left him there with his ideals and his gold eyes and his maddening calm. Instead, I hesitated. He noticed, of course. "Go," he said quietly. "You don't owe me anything." I met his gaze one last time. The firelight made his expression unreadable, the faint glow reflecting off his eyes like liquid amber. "Don't follow me," I said. "I won't," he answered. "But I'll be here, if you do." That was worse. I turned without another word and disappeared into the forest. The ground was soft with moss, the scent of rain still heavy in the air. But beneath it all lingered something else, clean, cold, and familiar. Kale. No matter how far I walked, his scent threaded through the wind, stubborn as the memory of warmth. And for the first time in years, I realized that solitude didn't smell the same anymore. 3 days passed before the scent returned. I'd been moving east through the foothills, where the trees grew lean and stubborn, and the streams turned to cold ribbons between rocks. The world had gone quiet, too quiet for comfort. When the wind shifted, it carried it to me again, pine, iron, and something that shouldn't have felt like home. Kale. I muttered a curse under my breath and kept walking. The scent of others came with his this time, stronger, sharper, alphas, not his scentmates. Theirs was the stink of pack arrogance and cheap dominance. Whoever they were, they didn't belong here, and they were close. By the time I caught the sound of padded feet behind me, it was already too late to pretend I hadn't noticed. "Didn't anyone teach you idiots not to sneak up on a predator?" I said without turning. A low growl answered. There were at least 3 of them, maybe 4. Their leader stepped forward, broad, scarred, the kind who mistook volume for strength. "Found the stray," he said. "Omega, who thinks he's a legend." "Congratulations," I said. That must have taken an incredible amount of teamwork. The first hit came fast, too fast for a taunt to finish. I ducked. Claws raked air. The second caught my shoulder, tearing cloth and skin, hot pain blossoming under the rain-soaked fabric. I twisted, kicked, used the slope to drop one of them into the mud. He came up spitting earth, teeth bared. "Easy, boys," I said, panting. "You'll ruin my reputation if I die politely." "Don't worry," the leader snarled. "We'll make it loud." They closed in. I caught one across the jaw, felt bone give under knuckles, but another crashed into me from the side. We went down in a tangle of limbs and mud, growls and grunts blending with the rasp of breath. Then the forest shifted. A wind came, sharp, cold, clean, and with it, him. The first thing I saw was gold eyes between trees, glowing like the world had decided to ignite from within. The next was motion, pure, heavy, unstoppable. Kale hit the clearing like gravity had picked a side. 2 of the alphas went flying before they knew he'd arrived. The third turned, swung. Kale caught his wrist mid-strike and twisted until the cracks sounded like punctuation. The leader charged, roaring, but Kale met him head-on, and the ground itself seemed to recoil. I scrambled to my feet, wincing, wiping blood from my mouth. "I told you not to follow me," I shouted. He didn't look back. "And I told you not to run alone. Remind me to put that on your gravestone," I snapped, lunging at one of the survivors. He ducked, swiped, caught my ribs. Pain flared white-hot. I drove an elbow into his throat in return. He staggered, gasping. Out of the corner of my eye, Kale moved like thunder with muscle. Every motion deliberate, terrifyingly calm. The fight devolved into chaos, mud, teeth, and rain. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't noble. It was survival, raw and ugly and almost fun. At one point we collided back to back, both panting, both bleeding. "This feels familiar," Kale said. "Because it's my worst nightmare?" I wheezed. He grinned without turning. "Because we make a good team. Don't ruin it with optimism." The last of the attackers lunged from behind. I spun, claws ready. But Kale was faster. His hand closed around the alpha's throat. No flourish, no roar, just one sharp motion, and it was done. For a moment, all I could hear was rain and breathing. Then the forest exhaled. We stood there, muddy, torn, and very much alive. Kale turned toward me, wiping blood from his mouth with the back of his hand. "You okay?" "I've had better mornings," I said. "You." He looked down at his arm, where a gash ran from wrist to elbow. "Could use a new coat. Could use a new brain," I muttered. For showing up. He gave me that infuriating half-smile. You'd miss me if I didn't. Don't test the theory. We dragged the bodies out of the open space, leaving them for the scavengers. Neither of us said anything for a while. By the time we found a dry patch under a fallen pine, the rain had turned to drizzle. Kale crouched and started another fire. Even soaked, he managed to make it look easy. I sat across from him, exhaustion sinking into my bones. The air between us was heavy but quieter, the kind of quiet that didn't demand distance. He tossed me a rag for the cut on my side. I pressed it there, hissing through my teeth. He smirked. Now we're even? I frowned. Even? You saved me with your trap, he said, poking at the fire. I just saved you with my teeth. Charming, I said. Next time, I'll send a thank you note. He laughed. Soft, genuine, warm in a way I didn't expect. It rolled through the canyon like the rain giving up. We sat in silence after that, the fire snapping between us, throwing orange light across the mud-streaked ground. The smell of blood mixed with smoke, but somehow it wasn't unpleasant. The tension that had always filled the air between us had changed. It wasn't the sharp kind anymore. It was quiet, domestic, almost, as if the fight had burned away something heavier than fear. Kale leaned back against a rock, eyes half-lidded, watching the fire. You know, he murmured, I wasn't wrong. You're terrible at being alone, and you're terrible at minding your own business. He smiled faintly. Maybe that's what makes us compatible. Don't push it. But I didn't move away. I just sat there, listening to the rhythm of his breathing and the faint crackle of the fire, and tried very hard to ignore the warmth spreading somewhere I didn't have a name for. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just surviving. I was sharing the silence. I tried to leave at dawn. The world was still dripping from the night's rain. The sky a pale wound above the ridges. My cuts had stopped bleeding, but the ache stayed, an echo of everything I didn't want to name. The fire we'd shared had burned out hours ago, but its warmth still clung to me in a way I couldn't shake. So I walked. Each step away from Kale felt like peeling off a layer of skin. Necessary, painful, wrong. The wind carried traces of him anyway, that clean, sharp scent of pine and cold air. It lingered no matter how far I went, no matter how fast. By midday, the forest thinned into bare rock. I climbed until my lungs burned and my boots slipped on wet stone. The ridge stretched ahead, gray and endless, a promise of solitude. I told myself that was all I wanted. Except my beast didn't believe it. It growled beneath my skin, restless, pacing, frustrated. Every instinct screamed contradiction. Run, but not away. Hide, but not from him. It was maddening. Shut up, I muttered to no one. The wind answered with a whisper that smelled like him again. And then I heard it. Footsteps, steady, confident, too heavy to be chance. I turned, already snarling before I saw him. Kale stood a few yards down the slope, sleeves rolled up, shirt torn, mud still caked on his boots. He looked like he'd been walking for days without sleeping. Somehow, that only made him look more alive. Persistent bastard, I said. He gave a small, breathless laugh. You make it sound like a compliment. It's not. Then stop saying it like one. I sighed, exasperated. You just don't quit, do you? He started climbing toward me. I told you before, I don't know how. Go back, I warned. You've done enough heroics for one lifetime. He shook his head. You think this is about saving you? It's always about saving something with you. Not this time, he said, closing the distance. This time it's about staying. Something inside me snapped at that. Too sharp, too raw. I lunged first. The impact sent us both sprawling onto the cold rock, my hand fisting in his collar, his breath colliding with mine. The fight wasn't clean. It never is when neither side really wants to win. He caught my wrist. I slammed him back. He twisted, flipped me, pressed down. The ground dug into my spine. My claws raked his sleeve, tore fabric, drew a line of blood across his arm. He hissed, not from pain but from something that sounded dangerously close to laughter. Still trying to scare me? He asked. Still here, aren't you? We rolled again. Mud and rain and breath, turning everything into heat. The mountain felt too small to hold it. He pinned me finally, forearm across my chest, his weight holding me to the ground. His face hovered inches above mine, wet hair falling forward, eyes burning gold even in shadow. Enough, he growled. The sound wasn't anger. It was command, raw and wild. I'm not your enemy, Troy. I'm just the one who doesn't give up. I met his stare, refusing to look away. And I'm the one who can't be tamed. For a moment, neither of us moved. The air between us pulsed, charged, alive. My pulse thundered in my throat. His breath hit my skin, hot and unsteady. The line between fight and something else blurred until I couldn't tell where one ended. He exhaled slowly, voice low. Then maybe we're both too stubborn for our own good. Maybe, I said. But you started it. He laughed, a rough, broken sound that cracked open something in both of us. The tension spilled out with it, like a dam giving way. He shifted his weight, released my arms and collapsed beside me, breathing hard. We lay there in the mud and wind, two fools who'd run out of reasons to keep fighting. For a while, all I heard was our breathing and the steady drip of water from the rocks above. I think, Kale said finally, between breaths, this officially counts as a draw. I turned my head toward him, a wry smile pulling at my mouth. You're terrible at winning. You're terrible at leaving. Touché. He chuckled softly, rubbing his face with one muddy hand. Remind me to stop trying to have rational conversations with a man who bites. Remind me to stop entertaining alphas with a death wish. He gave a quiet hum of agreement. The wind rolled over us, cold but clean. For the first time in a long while, the silence didn't weigh heavy. It breathed. I felt it settle under my skin, that strange, uneasy peace that comes after everything breaks. Kale turned his head slightly, eyes half-lidded, gold gone soft. You done running yet? I thought about it, about the forest, the graves, the ghosts, the years of running from every scent that reminded me of what I'd lost. Maybe, I said finally. He smiled faintly, closing his eyes. Good. My legs were getting tired. That earned a laugh out of me. Unexpected, sharp, real. The sound echoed off the stone and came back lighter. We stayed like that, lying in the mud and wind, laughing at nothing. And everything. Both of us too bruised and too stubborn to move. It wasn't victory. It wasn't surrender. It was something in between, something like freedom. Morning came soft and slow, like the world had decided to forgive us. Mist clung to the slopes, turning the mountain into something half-remembered, half-dreamed. The air smelled of wet earth, smoke, and faint traces of blood. Iron and ash, life and aftermath. The kind of scent that said you survived but not unscarred. I opened my eyes to the pale wash of light cutting through the fog. Kale lay a few feet away, one arm flung over his face, his chest rising and falling, with the stubborn rhythm of someone who had fought the world and refused to die. His coat was soaked, his hair a mess of dark strands clinging to his neck, but there was a kind of peace in his stillness. I stretched, every muscle protesting. My ribs ached, my shoulder was one long complaint. The ground beneath us was littered with broken branches, torn leaves, and the faint shimmer of spent rage. Somewhere behind the pain something else hummed, quiet, unexpected calm. You're awake, Kale said without moving. You're observant, I answered. Voice rough with sleep. He laughed under his breath. Couldn't help it. You snore, liar. He rolled onto his side, propping himself up on one elbow. Maybe just breathe loudly, then. Because you were sleeping right next to me, apparently. He gave a lazy shrug. I wasn't sure if you'd run again. I wanted to be nearby when you did. I smirked, though my pulse betrayed me. To stop me? To say goodbye properly, he said. His tone was too honest for teasing. The silence stretched between us again, not heavy this time, just there, like a heartbeat shared between two creatures who'd finally run out of reasons to bite. You know, he said at last, eyes tracing the edges of the sky. You'll never be mine. The words should have sounded like a warning. They didn't. I turned to look at him fully, the corners of my mouth tugging upward. No. But I'm still here. That's worse, isn't it? He snorted, then broke into real laughter. Deep, unguarded, the kind that started in the chest and left warmth behind. I joined him before I could stop myself. We laughed until it hurt, until the mountain threw the sound back at us like it was in on the joke. Two bruised, bloody idiots lying among bones and sunlight, laughing because for the first time, nothing was hunting us. When the laughter faded, Kale exhaled, slow and content. You have a terrible sense of timing, you know that? I learned from the best, I said. He smiled, and for a moment I thought the world might stay like this, balanced on that fragile edge between chaos and quiet. Eventually, he stood, brushing dirt from his hands, wincing as his leg protested. The gash from the fight had scabbed over but still looked ugly. He didn't seem to care. I reached into the pouch at my belt and pulled out a small, smooth sliver of bone. Clean, pale, ready. Kale noticed. Another warning for the next fool who crosses your path. Something like that. I took my knife and, with slow precision, burned 2 marks into its surface, my spiral, sharp and deliberate. And beside it, his symbol, the northern curve he'd once traced in the dirt when talking about his homeland. 2 signs, different but joined, pressed into the same bone. When it was done, I placed it on the ground between us. He watched quietly. That for me? For whoever finds it, I said. A reminder that not all hunts end in blood. He crouched, studied it for a long time, then nodded. Looks better with 2 marks. Yeah, I said softly. It does. The wind stirred, lifting the edge of my hair, carrying away the smell of smoke and the faint metallic bite of yesterday. Kale straightened, stretching his shoulders with a grimace. What now? I looked toward the horizon where the mist was finally breaking apart, sunlight catching on the distant trees like fire. Now, I walk. Maybe rest. Maybe find a place that doesn't know my name. And if I happen to walk the same way, I shrugged. Then it's not running. It's coincidence. He grinned. Convenient coincidence. Don't push it, I said. But my tone betrayed the warmth behind it. He started down the slope, limping slightly. I lingered for a moment, staring at the bone in the dirt. Our bone. The mark of what we were, what we weren't, and what neither of us could name. The light touched it, caught on the burned edges, made it glow faintly gold. Maybe I wasn't his. Maybe I never would be. But I'd stopped feeling like prey the day he stopped trying to own me. I smiled to myself, stepping away, the wind carrying his scent down the mountain ahead of me. Maybe I wasn't walking toward him. Maybe I was just following the echo of laughter that refused to fade. And as the sun broke over the ridge, painting the world in gold and smoke, I thought, maybe I never became his prey. Maybe I just found someone who doesn't let go, even without chains.